Okay, so we're finally seeing a ceasefire in this Israel-Hamas conflict.
Yeah, 15 months.
Grueling months.
A long time coming.
And it's taken a huge toll.
Yeah.
Over 46,000 Palestinians killed since October of 2023. It's a heavy, heavy price to pay.
Yeah.
And now everyone wants to know, will this ceasefire hold?
Right. And I think the big question is this time different? We've seen ceasefires attempted before, and they haven't always, held.
Yeah, I mean, you see these images coming out of Gaza celebrations. People are in the streets.
Yeah.
There's a sense of relief.
Absolutely.
But you read some of the quotes from people, and there's this underlying
hesitancy.
Yeah. Like, are we really supposed to believe this?
Yeah. Is this really going to last? And I think that comes from a history of broken promises and renewed conflict.
So let's get into the actual deal itself and see what it looks like. Al Jazeera has a pretty breakdown of it, and they kind of lay it out in these 3 phases.
Yeah.
The first phase being sort of like a 6-week, I don't know, what do we even call it? Like a trust building or
a trial period.
Yeah, a trial period.
A confidence building measure.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Where you have a limited prisoner exchange.
Yeah.
Some Israeli troops are going to pull back from Gaza.
Partially, yeah.
Yeah, and a surge of humanitarian aid is going to be going in because obviously
the situation is dire.
Things are really bad there. But, and this is big, but Israel's saying we're not giving any written guarantees.
Beyond these 6 weeks.
Beyond these 6 weeks. So it's like, we'll play nice for a little bit, but after that,
we'll see.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, so that's a major point of friction, right? I mean, why would Hamas or, the Palestinians feel secure if there's no guarantee beyond these 6 weeks?
So then phase 2, assuming everything goes well in these first 6 weeks, kicks in. And this is where things get a little more
serious.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Hamas expected to release all of their remaining captives.
Living captives.
Yeah, living captives.
Which is mainly Israeli soldiers.
Right.
And then in return, Israel would fully withdraw from Gaza.
That's a huge step for both sides.
Huge.
Yeah.
So this is where I think the international community is going to have to really step up and hold everyone accountable, because
they're going to have to be the guarantors.
Right. Because if either side backs out, then
the whole thing falls apart.
The whole thing falls apart. And who are we talking about here specifically when we say international community?
So you've got Egypt, Qatar, and the U.S. have all been involved in mediating the ceasefire. And they're going to have to play a really active role in ensuring that both sides follow through.
So do you think they can pull it off? I mean,
that's a good question.
Given everything that's happened in the past, can we really trust that?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, you have to remember there are hardliners on both sides.
Okay.
People who don't want to see this peace deal succeed. They might try to sabotage it.
And that makes
it's a fragile situation.
Yeah. So many things could go wrong.
Absolutely.
So let's say hypothetically they get through these first 2 phases. What does that third phase, the long game, look like?
Well, that's when we get into rebuilding Gaza, right? I mean, rebuilding it from the ground up and trying to create some sort of framework for
a lasting peace.
Yeah, for a lasting peace.
But that brings up the question of who's actually going to be in charge, right? Like, who's going to govern Gaza?
Right.
How are they going to manage this massive rebuilding process?
Huge questions, yeah.
And how do you even begin to prevent another outbreak of violence down the line?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And there are no easy answers.
But I heard there was a bit of a surprising twist to this whole story, like a key player that maybe no one expected to be involved.
Yeah, there is. It's actually quite interesting. We can unpack that in part 2.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's do it.
So you want to know about the surprising player?
Lay it on me.
Well, it turns out that Steve Witkoff had a hand in this.
Steve Witkoff?
Yeah. Trump's former Middle East envoy.
Wait a minute. The real estate mogul, Steve Witkoff.
The one and only.
What's he doing involved in Israeli-Palestinian peace talks?
That's what everyone's asking. It seems he was instrumental in pushing Israel towards this deal.
So how did a real estate guy end up as a peacemaker?
Well, according to a piece in The Guardian, Witkoff leveraged his personal relationship with Netanyahu.
Oh, from back in the Trump days.
Exactly. They go way back. And it seems he used that connection to apply some pressure.
Wow. So we've got Trump's former envoy working behind the scenes to broker a ceasefire. It's like a blast from the past.
It really is. And you have to wonder if this has anything to do with Trump hinting at another presidential run.
Right. Is this some sort of strategic move to boost his foreign policy cred?
It's definitely a possibility. And if this deal succeeds, it could give him some serious momentum.
Imagine that Trump back in the White House with a Middle East peace deal under his belt.
It would be a game changer, and it puts the Biden administration in a tough spot.
Yeah, they can't exactly ignore a potential peace deal.
Right, but they also don't want to hand Trump a political victory.
So it's not just about Israel and Hamas anymore. We've got U.S. domestic politics tangled up in all of this.
Absolutely. It adds a whole new layer of complexity.
And it reminds us that even conflicts that seem far away can have ripple effects.
Right, they can impact the global stage in ways we might not expect.
Okay, so putting aside the whole Trump angle for a moment, are there other reasons to be skeptical about this ceasefire?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even if we set aside all the political maneuvering, there are still some serious doubts.
Like what?
Well, for starters, the three-phase structure itself is full of potential pitfalls.
Yeah, we talked about the lack of written guarantees beyond phase one.
Right. That's a huge red flag. It creates a lot of uncertainty.
And makes it harder for both sides to fully commit.
Exactly. And then even if they do manage to get through that first 6 weeks, phase 2 is even more challenging.
With the prisoner exchange and the full Israeli withdrawal.
It's a tall order. It demands a level of trust and cooperation that's been missing for a long time.
And then there's the whole issue of rebuilding Gaza.
Right, the scale of the devastation is just massive.
Billions of dollars in aid are going to be needed.
And even then, it's not just about rebuilding infrastructure.
It's about rebuilding livelihoods, a sense of hope.
And that's a much more difficult task.
And it all hinges on having a stable and accountable government in place.
Which brings us back to that question of governance.
Right. The Al Jazeera article mentioned this idea of an interim governing authority.
It's a complex proposal.
Yeah. Is that even a realistic solution?
It's hard to say. The idea is to have the Palestinian Authority invite international partners to oversee things in the short term.
To help ensure stability and manage the reconstruction process.
Exactly. But there are concerns that it could just prolong the status quo.
Right. Just kicking the can down the road without really addressing the root causes of the conflict.
And then there's a question of who these international partners would be.
What their mandate would be, how much power they would have.
So many unanswered questions.
Yeah, it feels like we're back in murky territory.
A lot of potential for things to go wrong.
So what needs to happen for this interim authority to actually work?
Well, first and foremost, there needs to be a clear and agreed upon mandate.
Right. What are their specific goals? What powers will they have? How will they be held accountable?
And it can't just be a top-down approach.
It has to involve the people of Gaza.
Absolutely. They need to feel like they have a voice in shaping their own future.
So it's not just about who's in charge, but about creating a system that actually works for the people.
A system that's responsive to their needs and empowers them to build a better future.
But even with the best of intentions, this is going to be an incredibly difficult path.
No doubt about it, the odds are stacked against them.
So where do we go from here? If even this carefully crafted ceasefire is facing such an uphill battle, what hope is there for a lasting peace?
It's a heavy question, and while I can't offer any easy answers or guarantees, I think it's important to remember that hope exists even in the darkest of times.
Hope that this time could be different.
Exactly. And that hope isn't unfounded. It's fueled by the people working tirelessly to bridge divides and build a better future.
By the resilience of the Palestinian people, who've endured so much, yet still strive for peace.
And by the growing recognition that the status quo is unsustainable, that a just and lasting peace is the only way forward.
It's a powerful message of hope amidst all the uncertainty. But as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there's one more piece of the puzzle to consider: the broader geopolitical implications of this ceasefire.
You're right, this isn't just a local conflict. Its ramifications extend far beyond the borders of Israel and Palestine.
Okay, so let's take a deep breath and prepare to go even deeper. We'll explore those geopolitical implications in the final part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back and ready to dive into the final part of this ceasefire deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground so far. The deal itself, the challenges ahead, that unexpected role of Steve Witkoff, the whole rebuilding process. And now I want to zoom out a bit. What are the wider implications of all this? How's this ceasefire going to shake things up on the global stage?
Yeah, you're right. This isn't just some isolated event in the Middle East. It has the potential to really shift things globally. Whenever you see a major conflict like this start to wind down, it creates this power vacuum.
Right, and everyone wants to fill it.
Exactly. Everyone's going to be jostling for position, trying to figure out how to leverage this new reality.
So let's break it down. We touched on the potential strain on U.S.-Israel relations earlier. How could this impact things between Biden and Netanyahu?
Well, if Trump really is operating behind the scenes, like some reports suggest, it definitely undercuts Biden's authority.
Makes him look weak.
Exactly. And it plays right into that narrative that Biden's not tough enough on foreign policy.
And if Trump does decide to run again,
This could be a major talking point for him. Look, I brought peace to the Middle East, something Biden couldn't do.
right, so we've got this whole internal U.S. political drama unfolding with the fate of the Middle East hanging in the balance.
And it doesn't stop there. This also has huge implications for the regional power dynamic.
So who are the other key players we need to be watching?
Well, Egypt, for one, they played a crucial role in mediating the ceasefire, and a successful outcome would be a huge win for them.
Boosts their credibility.
Absolutely. They've always wanted to be seen as the peacemaker in the region, and this could really solidify that role.
And what about the Gulf states? They've been getting closer to Israel lately. Could this accelerate that trend?
I think it's definitely possible. With tensions easing, they might feel more emboldened to openly cooperate with Israel.
Economically, and maybe even on security issues.
Exactly, and that could lead to the formation of a whole new power bloc in the region.
Which might not be good news for everyone. I'm
Yeah.
guessing you're talking about Iran.
Iran has always positioned itself as a defender of the Palestinian cause. This deal, especially if it's perceived as an Israeli victory, could leave them feeling isolated.
Push them to the sidelines.
Exactly. They might feel the need to assert themselves in other ways, maybe through their nuclear program or by supporting proxy groups in the region.
It's like a giant chessboard, and every move has these cascading consequences. But amidst all this strategic maneuvering, we can't forget about the human cost of this conflict. What does this ceasefire actually mean for the people on the ground?
You're absolutely right. All this geopolitical analysis is meaningless if it doesn't translate into tangible improvements for ordinary people.
So what should we be looking for to gauge whether this is really making a difference?
Well, first and foremost, a sustained reduction in violence. People need to feel safe in their own homes. Children need to be able to go to school without fear. Families need to be able to rebuild their lives.
That sense of security is essential, but it's not enough, right? We need to see progress on the humanitarian front, too.
Absolutely. Gaza is in dire straits. People need food, water, shelter, medical care. The international community has pledged billions in aid, but will it actually reach those who need it most?
And will it be used effectively?
That's another key question. And it all comes back to the issue of governance. Without a stable and accountable authority in Gaza, even the best-intentioned aid efforts might fail.
So we've talked about the possibility of an interim governing authority, but there are so many unknowns.
Will it be truly inclusive? Will it have the power to tackle the root causes of the conflict? Will it be able to resist corruption?
It feels like we're ending this deep dive with more questions than answers.
That's often the case with complex geopolitical situations, but I think what's important is that we don't just shrug our shoulders and move on.
Right, we need to stay engaged and informed, hold our leaders accountable, demand better for the people of this region.
Absolutely. This isn't just a news story, it's about real lives, real families. This ceasefire represents a glimmer of hope, but it's just the beginning of a very long and difficult road.
And ultimately, it's up to all of us to make sure that hope doesn't fade, that we continue to push for a future where everyone in the region can live in peace and dignity.
Well said. It's easy to get lost in the complexities of geopolitics, but at the end of the day, peace is about people. Creating a world where everyone can live with security and hope. That's the goal, and that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. And on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive into this fragile ceasefire. We've explored the deal itself, the potential roadblocks, the surprising players, and the wider geopolitical implications.
We've talked about the challenges, but also the glimmers of hope. It's a complex and evolving situation, and we'll continue to follow it closely.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope this has given you a deeper understanding of this critical issue and inspired you to stay informed and engaged.
Remember, knowledge is power, and with that power comes the responsibility to act. Let's all do our part to create a more peaceful and just world.
Thanks for listening.